Liberty Nation. Truth is making a comeback.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation's Liberty Nation TV. I'm your host, Mark Angelides, and once again I'm joined by the incomparable Mr. Jeff Charles, who it's my absolute pleasure this week to be talking about the First Amendment, free speech, the press, and government interference. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Absolutely my pleasure. So, Jeff, first of all, could you give us a bit of a lowdown on what you see as the situation for freedom of the press in the United States today?
As far as freedom of the press, I mean, the United States, it's pretty much the same. I mean, people in the press are able to publish whatever they want, and they're able to have access to the government. I'm not sure that the United States has ever had a really serious issue as far as allowing journalists to do their jobs. Now, under the previous administration, under the Obama administration, there were some issues with the Obama administration conducting surveillance on certain reporters and monitoring their communications. But before that, I mean, in recent memory, there hasn't really been a huge issue with the government interfering with the press. Although people like to make it sound like President Trump is doing that, he's not.
Right. That's actually why I asked the question, because I keep reading about how Trump's out to destroy the media. But as far as I'm aware, the only recent history, as you mentioned, was under the Obama administration, where they were attempting to compel journalists to disclose sources. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It was basically applying pressure to members of the Associated Press, monitoring their emails and their phone records to. I think they were trying to track down leaks or something like that, but it was a violation of the freedom of the press. If you have leaks, you have to take care of that in your own administration. Whereas on the other hand, with Trump, I mean, there have been leaks from the White House, tons of them with President Trump, and he has taken no action against the press. I'm sorry, but saying mean things about journalists and calling them out when they're biased is not the same thing as cracking down on freedom of the press.
Absolutely right. I mean, one of the reasons that Mr. Charles and I are talking about this today, dear reader, is because in the UK at the moment, there's a citizen journalist, Tommy Robinson, who has been arrested, charged, and imprisoned for 13 months. This whole thing from arrest to imprisonment took just a few hours, and it's been shut down entirely by the British government using what we call a D-notice, which is a voluntary ban on reporting. It's a voluntary thing. So there are some people who have reported on it, but most of the main media, the regular media, has completely blocked out on this. And do you think things like this happen in the US, Jeff?
No, and honestly, when I read your article about it, it blew my mind. As an American, that type of treatment is so foreign to us. I mean, the idea that, I mean, you said that he was arrested, tried, and convicted within the period of a few hours for videotaping suspects going into court. And they're covering up for something that is happening to children. That is horrible. And so to me, it's like, I hope we never get to that point. I know there might be some people who want to push more towards that, but it's nothing but simple tyranny. I mean, that's the only way to describe it.
Yeah, it's quite shocking and very worrisome for me as a Brit journalist, obviously. But what I really want to get to, Jeff, is the main difference here. I think the reason that these things can happen to journalists and citizens in Britain is because what we don't have is the all-important First Amendment. Now, how do you feel that's faring under the challenges from the Democrats? Because, not just the Democrats, of course, but I read all the time that this is a First Amendment issue, free speech is being limited. What do you make of it?
Yeah, and you're right. It isn't just the Democrats, but right now, most of the majority of the attacks on the First Amendment, 99.9% of them are coming from the left. You don't have a whole lot of people advocating for the government to regulate free speech, but there are rumblings of it. Like the former FEC chairwoman has actually called for the government to regulate political speech on social media. but they do try to shut down free speech in other ways. Like you have groups like Antifa who physically assault people at Trump rallies and things like that. You have moves by Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to censor conservative voices on their platforms. Now, they're private companies, so they have every right to do that. At the same time, it does give you an indication on how the far left perceives the idea of free speech and who should be allowed to express certain ideas.
Yeah, very much. The in Canada and in the UK, we have what are technically called hate speech laws, which I pray that America doesn't introduce these. They're pernicious, they're dangerous, and it's not so much about what you say. The very basis of hate speech laws it's about what you think, and it's awful. It's really an attempt, in my opinion, it's an attempt to control what and how people think, specifically through the destruction of language, very much a 1984 issue. What do you make of it, Jeff?
Yes, I mean, and I think that the same thing is happening in the United States, just not with the government, but you see private companies doing it. So like, for instance, Spotify, one of the major music streaming services, has now released a new code or a new policy that they're implementing with the help of the Southern Poverty Law Center, as well as other far left groups, to regulate what they call hate speech, just like what you're talking about. And the thing is, it always sounds nice at the beginning. So, I mean, if somebody's calling for violence against Muslims or against Jews or something like that, they want to address that. But that can easily seep into something else. Like for instance, if somebody says something critical about radical Islamic terrorism, they can perceive that as hate speech because they're going to imply that you're lumping all Muslims in with that group. So really, to me, it's a stepping stone that they're going to use to try to suppress certain types of speech.
Yeah, it's the tyrannical tiptoe shuffle. Funny you should mention about the Southern Poverty Law Center, because as you mentioned, they are now regulating or advising in some way Spotify. They are also doing the same job for Amazon. I don't know if you heard about this, but
Yes.
yeah, the Amazon Smile program, which is the charitable part of Amazon, where a percentage of for the readers, a percentage of your purchase can be donated to a charity. Now, obviously, charities need the money that we give them, and if we can help out by adding this on our purchases, and it costs us nothing else, it's wonderful. But what's happening is Amazon has granted the Southern Poverty Law Center the right to choose who is a deserving charity, and it's really no surprise that some of the first groups culled from the program, let's say that they're not on the left of politics.
Of course.
Yeah, it's really quite bad, I think. Jeff.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty horrible. And what is interesting about that Smile program is that they allow other groups on there that have ties to terrorist groups like Hamas or radical extremist groups, but others that may have like a conservative Christian outlook, they're banning them or they're suppressing them. So this isn't really as innocent as they're making it sound. If that were the case, they would target any type of extremism, but they're not. So you can see where they're trying to go with this. So the same thing that the Southern Poverty Law Center is doing with Amazon, they're going to be doing with Spotify. There might be other companies that implement similar type of policies that allow these groups to basically police what people say using their platform.
Yeah, and we do know for a fact that places like the Southern Poverty Law Center, I mean, I don't know a huge amount about them, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that their hearts are in the right place. But we know for a fact that they've been wrong. For example, the British radio show host, Majid Nawaz, himself of Muslim background, was put on their extremist lists, as they put on their list as an extremist, when in fact I believe he founded and he certainly helps run a group called the Quilliam Group, which is ways of helping people get out of extremism. So, and he threatened them with court, and they've redacted his name from their list. So they do make mistakes. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're doing this from a position of they want to help and they want things to be good. But it really is a very, very slippery slope. Jeff, that's wonderful. I'm afraid that's all we do have time for. So thank you for being here, Jeff. Always an absolute pleasure to talk with you. And again, thank you to you at home for listening and watching. Be the first to know the facts behind every breaking news story. Just download the all-new LibertyNation.com news and commentary app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Once you get the LibertyNation.com app, you'll finally have the truth at your fingertips. Thank you for watching.
Liberty Nation. News and commentary, minus the propaganda. LibertyNation.com.